Welcome to the LEAD Center webinar on the self-guided discovery application process. This is Rebecca Salon. I'm Project Director for the LEAD Center at the National Disability Institute. Today you'll hear from me and two speakers from Griffin Hammis Associates. Bob Nemec is Senior Consultant with Griffin Hammis Associates, Inc. Bob served as the Director of the Minnesota Employment Training and Technical Assistance Center and was a Director of Employment and Community Support for Community Involvement Programs in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where he led the transformation of a traditional day program into a high-quality community employment service. Bob has provided training and consultation services in 44 states and 2 Canadian provinces, as well as assisting in the planning and facilitation of Employment First events in 12 states. Bob also is a subject matter expert with the Office of Disability Employment Policy's Employment First State Leadership Mentoring Program, and is a past president of APSE, the Association of People Supporting Employment First. Corey Smith is a senior consultant for Griffin Hammis Associates, Inc., providing consultation and training around the country. He also works with the Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy, Virginia Commonwealth University, and with many other organizations, providing consultation, training on supported employment, customized employment, self-employment, alternative funding, and organizational transformation. In 2014, Corey received the APSE Dave Hammis Innovation Award for his work in customized employment and braided funding strategies. For those of you who are new to the LEAD Center, we are the National Center on Leadership for the Employment and Economic Advancement of People with Disabilities. We're a collaborative of disability, workforce, and economic empowerment organizations led by the National Disability Institute with funding from the U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy. Our mission is to advance sustainable individual and systems level change that results in improved, competitive, integrated employment and economic self-sufficiency outcomes for individuals across the spectrum of a disability. I'd now like to ask my colleague, Nakia Matthews, to give you information about how to fully participate in this webinar. Nakia?
Thanks, Rebecca. Good afternoon, everyone. The audio for today's webinar is being broadcast through your computer. Please make sure that your speakers are turned on or your headphones are plugged in. You can control the audio broadcast via the audio broadcast panel. And if you accidentally close this, you can reopen the audio broadcast by going to Communicate at the top of your screen and choosing Audio Broadcast. If you do not have sound capabilities on your computer or you prefer to listen by phone, you can dial one of the toll-free numbers you see here, and I will type in the meeting code in the chat box for anyone who wants to listen by phone. Real-time captioning is provided during this webinar. The captions can be found in the Media Viewer panel, which appears in the lower right corner of the webinar platform. If you do not need the captions, you can close this close this window, and if you'd like to make the captions larger, you can close some of the other panels like chat or Q&A. There will be time for questions at the end of the webinar. Please use the chat box or the questions box to send any questions you may have during the course of the webinar to me, Nakia Matthews, or to Brittany Taylor. You can actually send them to Rebecca's attention. And we will direct those questions accordingly during the Q&A portion. If you are listening by phone and not logged into the webinar, you may also ask questions by emailing them to Brittany directly at btaylor@ndi-inc.org. Please note this webinar is being recorded and the materials will be placed on the LEAD Center website. You can go to leadcenter.org/webinars. If you experienced any technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the chat box to send me, Nakia Matthews, a message, or you may email me at nmatthews@ndi-inc.org. And I'll turn it back over to Rebecca.
Thank you so much, Nakia. So we just want to go over what we're going to discuss today. We're first going to provide an overview of the Self-Guided Discovery Initiative, describe what self-guided discovery is, review the application process and deadlines, and then be available to answer any questions you may have. And with that, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Bob Nemick and Corey Smith to describe self-guided discovery and what this training and technical assistance will provide. Bob and Corey?
Yeah, thank you. This is Bob, and talk a little bit about self-guided discovery and how it came to be. We've been, Griffin Hammes, among a group of people throughout the country who have been engaged in working with folks in a process of assessment known as discovery. And typically when we've done discovery, it has been guided by a facilitator or a guide who has done pretty much all the work for an individual job seeker. About 2 years ago, we started talking about people who didn't need nearly as much direct intervention or direct support in doing discovery, and we began the process of creating a self-guided discovery approach. And so what the self-guided discovery approach does is that it allows an individual job seeker, an individual or their family, to do most of the groundwork and then put it together into a format that fits a discovery staging record format, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we move along, in order to identify their skills and interests that are supported by skills. For the self-directed discovery piece, oftentimes people have had a prior career or are in the middle of a career, or perhaps in the case of some veterans, they have come home and are looking to do something different, or people who may have a certification or a higher degree, advanced college degree. The process was really designed for pretty much anybody. But what we've learned is that discovery is not something a person can do by him or herself. That when you try to do it by yourself, you run the risk of missing things that just aren't on your radar, that an ally or a family member or even a facilitator might be able to spot and help you stay on track. So the self-guided process is really self-guided to a degree. It's more about self-guided with assistance, but the assistance is less intense than doing a discovery where a discovery trained person does pretty much all the work with a job seeker or their family. So we began the process of writing a manual and putting together a format of how a self-guided approach would look in parallel with a guided approach, and so we completed that last year. So the discovery process that we're talking about, we use something, our particular slant on discovery is called Discovering Personal Genius, and it seeks to identify themes in a person's life, their interests, their skills, the people they know, the community in which they live, and using all that information in a guided process to help identify places, businesses, and places in the community where those themes are present and where those skills are valued and where those interests are matched with the interests of people who work in a similar kind of industry. And that creates a completely different pathway for job development. Corey, who is also on this call, my colleague Corey from Pennsylvania. Corey is, I think, one of the masters of job development using customized employment and discovery processes. So again, what will happen in the self-guided discovery process here is that people who participate in this training will learn how to guide discovery, and as opposed to doing it for somebody, you will be coming out of it either being able to do it for yourself or with somebody, or to help somebody stay on track. So that's a product that is the result of doing discovery. It's called a vocational profile, and that vocational profile, as I said, is the foundation that will jumpstart you toward what people commonly refer to as a job development process. But what we talk about doing is taking discovery and what you learn in discovery, and then moving it, linking it with the next step, which is job development. And in most forms of conventional vocational assessment, that linkage really doesn't exist. So I'm going to stop there. And Corey, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Bob, you're doing great. I think that, one of the other issues we find with the self-guided discovery is we have some really motivated families, but they don't have the system involved, or you have a veteran, you have somebody who has some strong links, and we hear Hillary Clinton saying it takes a village, but they don't have anybody trained in their area. They don't have that facilitator. So we have some families that are real committed, and it's all about making connections and maximizing social capital and going to the business community. One of our buzz terms these days is employer engagement, and even going back to the time of Dale DeLeo, when I do training these days, we have a lot of people in the room getting trained around employment, and when you ask them how many of them are involved in actually integrating and speaking with employers, that number is not as high as we'd like. So one of the exciting things about self-guided discovery is it brings in family, it brings in the individual. I was just thinking about, I was working with somebody recently who was a veteran, and when he left to go off the service, there were 3 small print companies in his hometown, and then when 2008 happened, you couldn't get a print job in this area. So the person kind of had to reinvent themselves. And remembering the other piece about, customized employment is we still have, all the other tools, and remembering that, self-employment seems to become more and more viable all the time.
So you can advance the slide if you'd like. Customized employment is really not a new concept. However, its genesis was back in about 2001 and 2002 out of the Office of Disability Employment Policy, where many of the people who were principal practitioners and thought leaders in supported employment became dissatisfied with the direction supported employment was going. And in supported employment, people were allowed to earn sub-minimum wages. In supported employment, there was a lot of congregate placement, group placement, work crews, enclaves, those types of things. And that in some supported employment, the payer, the employee, the individual worker was actually an employee of the rehab facility or day program under a subcontract rather than being an employee of a conventional community business. So what happened in the early part of 2001 was the creation of customized employment, which basically narrowed the targets and actually brought it back to some of the original ideas that founded supported employment. So you can look at these bullets here that, but what makes it interesting is that customized employment is based on an individual determination of strengths and needs and the interests of the job seeker, but unless that connects with what a specific business person might need, a potential employer, employment's probably not likely to happen for the right reasons. You might still find somebody who hires a person because they think it's a good thing to do, but that good thing to do feeling goes away pretty quickly if, one, the employee is not performing well, or two, whether the business is not performing well. So, so by narrowing the field of one person, one job, regular wages, ordinary community businesses, that kind of set a parameter for customized employment. So there's a big debate among people that have their foot in both worlds of customized employment and supported employment about some of the supported employment people bristle at customized employment. Some of the customized employment people bristle at the idea of calling customized employment supported employment on steroids. The reality is the principles, the ideals were the same. The difference is the target. And so in the customized employment world, the target is customization. And just because we use that word customized, we are more than inferring. We are stating it is individualized, that whatever, doing discovery as the fundamental piece and then following that towards job development for me will be way different than following it for Corey or anybody else on this. And what happened so often in the supported employment world was that there wasn't as much individualization as, and therefore the customized part really didn't exist in many cases. So that's kind of how it has grown for the past 15 years. Also, customized employment, you can develop it a lot of different ways. But I think if you look at that, where it says it may include employment developed through negotiations of jobs, self-employment, or other strategies being customized and individually negotiated, the key word in that bullet is negotiated. And we'll talk about that, and as we get into the series of webinars, you're going to hear both Corey and me focus an awful lot on the idea of what negotiation really looks like and how we approach that negotiation. So really, regardless of all these things, whether it becomes a self-employment opportunity or a wage employment opportunity, it's going to arrive at that through a negotiated process. Corey?
Thanks, Bob. I think one of the other parts of this is, that the sheer number of people we're dealing with. I'm working in New Jersey a lot these days, and the onset for males with autism is now 1 in 49. And I just don't know if the system's going to be able to keep up. But I'm really excited about the workforce centers being involved. And I think we're all seeing that in the national numbers are that the number of people with autism graduating is going to increase by 400% in the next 10 years, which is just an absolute huge number. And we're seeing a lot of folks now with either a master's degree, a PhD, but yet they're not going to fit into the going through human resources and going through the traditional ways of getting a job, that they're really going to need some level of customization. And I think the other thing is we have so many families now that are better educated, that are more committed, that have more connections, that are really interested.
Hello? I don't know if Corey dropped off or not, but if you want to give it back to me, I mean, I can take over. Sounded like he might have fallen off the radar here. Can you all still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So if you want to go ahead and move to slide 13. So we talk about who might benefit from self-guided discovery and customized employment. One thing I will say is that customized employment is a process that originally was focused on people who had the most complex situations, complex disabilities. But what we are learning is that it applies to anyone. And in fact, it's commonly put out there that somewhere in the neighborhood of 85% of all jobs are found through some personal connection. Also, I was reading something somewhere recently that said that only about 10% of all available open positions are ever posted publicly. And so if you know that, then that tells you that the conventional ways that we've been going at looking at employment are really focusing on a very small segment of what's visibly apparent to people. So in the customized employment world, we are taking what we learn about individuals and finding the vast majority of American businesses that happen to be small or medium-sized businesses. Many of those do not have HR departments, do not have job descriptions, and connecting people with people who do something that they're either interested in or that have a skill set that matches. And so this can be applicable to anybody. I helped a friend of mine who was in his 50s when he got laid off and went around to all these various job fairs and these kinds of things and got really frustrated about, being an older guy in the workforce, being unable to find a job. And we sat down and we started talking about the things that he did, what he knew how to do, what his skill set was, what he's really passionate about, and connect the dots. And anyway, about 2 months later, he got hired on as a maintenance guy for a city in Iowa, and now, like 3 years later, he's like the top maintenance guy. So this can work for all kinds of folks. So anybody who's in the workforce system, including people with disabilities, especially people with disabilities who don't compete well when it comes to the conventional comparative methods of hiring. So a comparative method, for instance, someone posts an open position and 10 people submit their resumes or an application, and then the employer on that end looks at those things and makes comparative decisions based on what they see in a resume or what they like or how it's written or whatever. And then they go through the next phase of the process, which might be personal interviews, and that comparison again occurs. If you have 3 candidates for a position and you are comparing one to the other and making a decision based on that. What we've learned is that people with disabilities typically lose in that comparative process. And so instead of getting into that comparative world, we're helping people, or trying to help people find those vast majority of positions available in small and large communities, as well as possibly microenterprise and self-employment opportunities by kind of ignoring the labor market, and instead let's find out what people do in your community. People with previous careers who may have acquired a disability, this customized process is really important. Maybe someone who has acquired a brain injury, or people who have acquired a physical disability, or maybe just the onset of their psychiatric disability has really accelerated later in life, and they have a skill set or an academic background. So those are also people who could benefit from this, or folks with a college degree or technical certificate or advanced training. One of the things that people might learn from this is that there are many, like if you were a chemist, there are many applications in businesses where chemistry is involved that aren't necessarily, apparent to most people. And by this process of conversation and social capital that Corey was talking about, you have a better chance of finding someone else who knows something about that, who might be able to connect you somehow. Veterans with service-related disabilities can benefit from this, and we've been working with something called the entrepreneurial boot camp for veterans, where using a discovery-based approach is helping some veterans identify business opportunities that they might be able to develop. And once again, transition-age youth with strong family and community ties, but actually, it really does, a transition-age youth who doesn't have a lot of connections, it would be a little bit harder to do this self-directed-wise. But one of the things that we are really stressing, just generally, is that if families start to do this type of self-directed approach with their sons and daughters when they're very young, like 10, 11 years old and perhaps even younger, and they start to help their sons and daughters acquire marketable skills, the chance that when their sons and daughters reach 18 or 19, which is typically a decision age that we all have had, where we have to decide school, work, what work, all that, they're going to be better prepared to handle that. And it's something that could happen over years. So for an individual, we might be talking about self-directed discovery taking a couple of weeks. But for families of young folks, we're talking about it taking years to do. And with that view of the world, that customized, discovery-based view of the world, it doesn't seem so daunting thinking about a young person with a disability going out and making a living or living in their ordinary communities if you've been working toward that. So, and ultimately, people who run businesses, employers benefit because employers hire basically for one reason and one reason alone, and that is that it will improve their business. So they'll hire you because you bring a skill set or a customer base that is going to improve their business, and when their business improves, their bottom line improves, and when their bottom line improves, they're happy. And so so any number of people can benefit from this, but I think one thing we don't have on this list, and just thinking about it as I read through it, is the critical element, regardless of any of these categories, is that the person is committed to and wanting to achieve an outcome at the end. Are you back, Corey?
Yeah, sorry, Bob. We lost power.
Okay. Do you have anything to add to that?
I just got back in. My apologies. Give me a second.
Okay. All right. Well, then we'll just move on to 14 then. You want to take this one, Corey? Or not? Okay. Well, the webinars will teach facilitators how to take job seekers through the process, a process of discovering what they have to offer an employer and their ideal conditions of employment. So what does that mean? Ideal conditions of employment are just these things that are present in employment situations that make it more likely for you to be successful. For instance, for me, if I had to sit at a desk all day, if I had to be at a cube all day and be quiet all day, it would not be an ideal condition of employment for me. So I need to be able to move around. I think that way. I need to be able to interact with other people to get ideas. So if I had to be kind of in a solitary cube environment sitting still, that's not an ideal condition of employment for me. Other ideal conditions of employment could be anything. It could be hygiene, it could be dress, it could be time of day, it could be distance of travel, it could be the environment. Is it clean, is it dirty, is it loud, is it quiet, is it accessible via public transportation? Is there a cultural bias? For instance, a company we visited just yesterday that was a food co-op, and talking to the manager of the food co-op, there's a definite cultural bias there, and by that I mean, things that are organic. There's also the cooperative bias. There's also kind of a social justice element that goes on there. So those are what we call cultural biases. Tool usage. Maybe you really have an affinity for using wrenches and those kinds of things. That's kind of a cultural, not a cultural bias, but an ideal condition of employment as well. So Corey, if you're in, just pop in on this. And so we'll look at at how we can identify those things with people, and then that leads us to building the profile that's used to develop a job search plan that helps you reach out to business owners, and that piece will be something that will be different for most people. The approach that we will talk about and share with you will be just a little bit different than most people might expect. So Corey, if you're able to get on, if you have anything you want to add to that, either of those two things.
One of the real important parts of this is, we just to give you an example, working with a young woman right now, and her themes were all about she has autism, she has some mental health issues, and she's simply just not that comfortable dealing with human beings every day or being in the front end. But I think she honestly is a savant, and she's gifted when it comes to breeding animals, and particularly breeding high-end birds. We're talking $2,000 to $5,000 birds. And when you spend time with her, it's just scary. You think you're dealing with a PhD. And at this point in time, we have a couple different places that they cannot believe the skills that she has. But we're not there yet with, looking for typical wage employment or the possibility of self-employment. But we have so many people now that, just picking on autism here, and people on the spectrum who have such competence, but yet, some of the social skills, they're not going to fit in entry-level jobs. And having these options and being able to, look at these different options and to help these folks do this in a different way. We really have to get some of these people unstuck, or we're going to have, we're just going to have way too many people unemployed. And I just think it's just so important to use this different approach.
So if you'd like to move to the next slide, please. And I know our plan is to deal with the Q&A at the end. So we see these questions and we're not ignoring them. The schedule for these, we have 4 2-hour webinars, and Corey and I will be tag teaming on these webinars, but one of us will be the lead presenter. The first one is on July 20th, and it's about just sort of an overview of what self-guided discovery is, about how customized employment is part of that, how the discovery process and discovering personal genius fits, and so it's really kind of a background. We will always be trying to engage you as the participants in a conversation or an ongoing learning community. After each one of the sessions, you'll have an assignment. You'll have to do something, and then submit that to Corey and me, and if we just talk to you about this, if you didn't go out and do some things, you'd have a hard time really grasping the information, and so anyway, so after each session there will be an assignment, and it won't be like hours and hours of time to do it, and there will be minimal writing, but it's just this is a discovery, and this process is a doing process, and you're going to hear Corey and me say that over and over and over again over the 4 sessions about this is about doing, and what's the doing going on here, and when you go visit a business, what are people doing? Now, when you have folks who have an advanced degree or a really high skill set, they might be able to find a job because they know something. They have a particular knowledge set. But most people get into this by doing things, and we're also seeing an upswing in the American economy of what's called the artisanal economy, where there's a return to handmade things, to craftspeople, tradespeople. There's a real shortage of tradespeople in the U.S. right now, and those are all about doing things. So anyway, then on August 3rd, the session on self-guided discovery activities, and Corey will be the lead on this one, and that's about the doing. And Corey, you want to talk a little bit about that part?
Yeah, we really want to, make sure that people are actively involved in the process. So we want to have people go out and investigate, to do informational interviews, to what we talk about, hanging out with intent. So we really need to get beyond if a person has, somebody's interested in listening to the music, or they're interested in sports, or if they're interested in yuppie coffee or ice cream, that discovery gets a lot deeper than just people's interests. So we really want to, in a real active way, we want to be talking to people, particularly Bob's talking about the artisan economy. We're focusing on small businesses every day, where you're not having to deal with the human resource process, which trips up most of our folks, and really getting to know employers. And that's just, the funnest part of this thing is we go to small business, we go to industry, we ask for advice, and then that's where you find out all these amazing ways that people make a living that we had no idea that people were doing before. So that's really important. So when we talk about developing the list of 20, so we develop the vocational themes, and we look at 20 different places where people make money doing the type of thing that our person has skills in. And this is really how we start moving on toward refining skills, refining people's themes, and moving into job development.
Great. And then the third session on August 17th, we'll spend a great deal of time, in fact, almost the whole thing, talking about how you take that information that you learn from those activities that Corey is talking about, and maybe some of those visits that people make with community businesses and places where people are doing things that they're interested in, and use the feedback from that to refine their vocational themes. And we really almost demand that you have to come up with 3 vocational themes. Now, those of you who participated in this, one of the things that we're going to ask you to do is to think about your own vocational themes, but we're going to give you some direction on how to do that. And once you're able to see that for yourself, then you can see how it applies to other people. And once again, we believe that this process of going through this webinar, the series of webinars, will give you both an overview from a didactic standpoint, where we're going to talk to you, but it also has to be experiential. You've got to be able to you've got to be able to internalize it and see how it feels, and in order to be able to empathize with job seekers and their families as well. Also, I want to jump back to August 3rd for a second. You'll see that term ecological fit. And all that means is ideal conditions of employment, that the places that we're going to help you find are going to fit what a person's ideal conditions of employment and their skill set are. So it's kind of a fancy word for a pretty simple concept. So we're going to spend August 17th talking about vocational themes, and then our final session on August 31st, Corey will take you through that linkage part. So you want to take that one for a second, Corey?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've learned through the years is that we find this ecological fit. We find this small employer where a person fits in like a glove. And what you hear from the employers has been for years is, boy, I'd love to have this person on, but I'm not generating enough revenue right now to have another set of hands around here. But this person really fits in, and we gave up. We gave up too quickly. So with customized strategies, instead of saying, well, this didn't work out, I guess we could see if Burger King's hiring. There are literally as many as 7 different strategies that we can help the person, work there. And time again, I'm really focused on autism today, but we have that person who really fits in somewhere, and the family's excited, and the person's excited, and the employer's excited, and we can negotiate strategies that have to do with helping somebody generate more revenue. We have a young guy in Los Angeles who's brought in a piece of equipment this year, and this new relationship is helping the employer generate another $65,000 in revenue. That is not only going to pay the salary for this young man working about 35 hours a week, $11 an hour, but it's also helping him to really increase profits. So looking at these strategies and refining what we're going to do to help more folks to kind of, to get what we call get unstuck.
Right, absolutely. And so Rebecca, I think you were going to take it from here.
At this project and this initiative, and I think the way that it's designed really will result in important outcomes for people. We all know that training in and of itself isn't enough, but training where you get a chance to actually get guidance as you're implementing it during the training and the technical assistance that we'll be able to provide following the training, I think will really enable people to become comfortable and really develop expertise in the many strategies that you're going to go over. So we wanted to talk through what's available, who's eligible, what it takes to apply, and those kinds of things. We are planning to accept 3 teams of about 8 people each. We want the teams to include at least 2 staff who work in the workforce system, at least 2 staff that work in vocational rehabilitation, at least 2 community employment partners, and 2 other partners who you would choose, or it could be an additional voc rehab staff person or an additional AJC staff person. But we want people to be trained as teams because as we all know, the more that we can leverage each other's resources, the more people that are pushing in the same direction and supporting people, the better. And we also know that people with disabilities often underutilize the workforce system, and so we want to make sure that we're supporting each other's efforts. Any partner can be the lead. It doesn't have to be led by VR or by an AJC, so a community partner can do it. A family advocate who really believes in this can be the lead. Each individual partner that is going to apply to be part of a team needs to fill out the 1-page, very simple application that we've provided as part of the application process. So we want to make sure that each individual person makes a commitment to being part of that so that we can see who's on the team. You can go to the next slide. Following the training, Lead Center staff and consultants will support implementation and the use of the tools that people will learn through on-site technical assistance as well as distance and virtual technical assistance, so phone calls, webinars, other kinds of support that can be available. The TA will support the use of tools used in customized job development, many of the techniques and strategies that Bob and Corey mentioned in terms of negotiation and informational interviews, and looking at what would be the ideal conditions for someone, whether they're interested in self-employment, whether they're interested in a particular field, and so that there are vocational themes that come out that would guide you towards certain types of employers. So the Lead Center staff will work with each team to develop a technical assistance plan in collaboration with Bob and Corey. We already mentioned that we want the teams to have a certain mix so that we have representation from the workforce system, vocational rehabilitation, and community employment providers. Each participant will fill out an application form and will sign a commitment as part of that form to implement self-guided discovery for at least 4 job seekers as a team. So it's not that each person has to work with 4 job seekers, but we would want the team as a whole to be getting support and guidance for at least 4 people. We also are asking that there be a signed commitment from the administrator or supervisors for the team members so that they agree to enable the staff who participate to fully participate, so that they agree to make sure that people are given the time to participate in the webinars and the subsequent technical assistance that will support implementation. So I think I'll stop there. I do want to mention that as we were preparing this, we have 2 errors or discrepancies on the application, on the instructions that went out. So we will, after this webinar, be sending out an updated instructions. We had the date wrong for the first webinar. We had down the 22nd instead of the 20th, and I apologize for that. Applications are due on June 15th, so it's a week from this coming Friday. Again, the applications are very simple. I mean, it really won't take more than 5 minutes to fill out the application. So we're hoping that that's sufficient time. Yeah, so it's a week and a half. Today is the 4th, so it's 11 days from now for people to submit the applications. We plan to have a pretty quick turnaround, so we hope to be able to notify the 3 sites on or about June 26th, so that you all will have the good part of a month before the first training starts. So at this point, we'd like to look at some of the questions. So one of the questions is about the best way to start the self-discovery process, and other questions about how to approach this kind of self-guided discovery with someone who may not communicate verbally and therefore would have to rely on their support network. I wonder if Bob or Corey want to respond to that.
Yeah, this is Bob. The best way to start this anytime is to talk to people. And so this process isn't something that we would ever recommend that somebody try to convince someone to do. Instead, you want to begin with people who will participate and actively participate, and they have to because there's a self-guided process, component to this. But we talk about this all the time when we're doing training generally. It is that the very first thing that a customized employment professional needs to do is to explain what they're doing. Talk to potential candidates and explain what they're doing, explain what the process looks like, explain it in a way that you're convinced that the person you're talking to understands what you're saying, understands how the difference between this and maybe more conventional ways that people think about having employment. Show them the materials that they'll be using, and then let the decision to start be theirs. I mean, you can pop the question like, well, when would you like to start? But nevertheless, it still has to be, at least the beginning, you still have to have willing participants and interested participants. Once that dam is broken, the rest of it flows. It's not necessarily that it's easier, but it flows. I know, Corey, if you would, what your take on that is.
I think you said it all, Bob. That it's the issue of finding, if getting this started, that sometimes you have somebody, it's like, I haven't been successful in employment using traditional strategies ever, and this looks like it's a little more intense. And you can't, if somebody says, but I want a job this afternoon, they've got to be able to hold still. It's just the most important thing is that the person and their support network get that this is just a little less conventional, but we think it's more effective, and it's going to end up with a job that's a better fit for the individual. is pretty important. And the other issue about people that are nonverbal, which is one of my favorite, is that, you know, this is such experiential kind of learning, is that the hope is that, you know, all behavior is a form of communication. But sometimes we have people with limited life experiences and then they don't have, you know, verbal communication. They don't have traditional forms of communication. So we have to spend time, you know, that's why we talk about doing things in the community and talking about getting people's hands dirty. And you know, having this experience is, how do you know if you're going to like a type of work if you've never worked, if you've never done anything. So this idea of doing informational interviews, the idea of meeting employers, of you know, again, we constantly use the term getting your hands dirty and to figure out what makes sense. I know years and years ago I had a young woman who had some communication, and she'd had there was a lawsuit where there's a health issue, and I had staff for 2 years telling me that you know, we needed to buy her a Pizza Hut. So we took her to Pizza Hut. We had lunch, and the manager came and she wrote on a piece of paper, "I like pizza. I don't want to work here." So that was but it took 2 years to get to that point. So this idea of, you know, all behavior being a form of communication and this being a really experiential way to get this is pretty important. Bob?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I think one of the other things that you want for you as a facilitator for the teams here, you know, as Rebecca stated, you know, you're going to be focusing on 4 individuals. And so our goal with you is to help you get those 4 people into employment as quickly as possible. And I think that's one of the things that if the question hasn't been asked, someone's going to ask it, how long does this take? And you know, I generally wind up giving them the economist's answer, which means it depends, right? But what we know is that the more rapidly this is done, you know, the more likely it is that things will happen. Now, I'm going to talk out the other side of my mouth for just a second and say, but when we talk about young kids, you know, family members who are in their early teens or such, it's going to take a little bit longer. But what we're looking for, even with those young folks, is to help their families get their sons or daughters into a job, a part-time job, like everyone else had when they're 15, 16 years old, so they get their experience, get their feet wet, get their hands dirty, as Corey is saying. So it's a broad range. But to go back to that time element for a second, you know, one of the things that I find really interesting is if you had a room full of VR counselors, and I'm not picking on VR counselors, I'm just saying, if you had a room full of VR counselors and you asked them to raise their hand if they've had somebody in job development or on their caseload for job development for over a year, pretty much everybody's hand would go up. And so what we're saying is that this shouldn't take a year. You know, this should take a lot less time than that. But we can't give you a specific number because that's going to be up to you about how often you work with somebody, how often you meet with them, how often you set time goals with them. But we'll get through that when we get through the training. And also to echo what Corey said about people who don't have verbal skills or don't use verbal skills. This is all about doing, and it's all about observation on the part of people going through discovery and facilitators, watching what people do, watching what they gravitate toward. Not being verbal it doesn't mean you don't have interests or don't have skills, and so it takes a little longer probably. You know, you're going to do different things to try to tease out skills and tease out themes, but the process will still work.
Thank you so much. Great response, Corey and Bob. I want to respond to a couple of other questions that have been posted. There's a question about whether or not VR staff can only be rehab counselors, asking whether or not those are the best people to send. And we really would leave that to you. We want the people who are part of this training and technical assistance to be people who can implement this. You may decide later to make this an organizational-wide approach, but we want people to have experience and to take advantage of the technical assistance that's available and the ability to work as part of a team and leverage each other's resources. So, you know, we are not requiring that they be rehab counselors. I think, you know, that's for each of you to decide as to who would be the best team members. In some cases, you may want to include a family member or two, you know, who might be able to support that. There was another question about whether or not the webinars are specifically for the team training participants. And again, yes, the webinars are for the people who apply to be part of the team, and that's the group that will come up with a technical assistance plan and get the support to implement that. We can decide, you know, as this is going forward, what next steps might be in organizations, but that's where we're going to start. There are a number of other questions, and what we will do, and feel free to keep typing in questions, but our time is almost up, is we will post with the recording of this webinar and with the slides and with an updated request for applications, answers to the questions that we didn't get to. One of the questions was exactly what time of day the 2-hour webinars will be. We will post all of that information in the questions and answers. We just wanted to share a little more information. As a companion piece, the LEAD Center is also soliciting employment and career success stories that detail creative approaches and strategies for achieving positive employment outcomes, and we want each of the stories to be in instances where someone is successfully employed, where you've used some aspect of customized employment to do that, where you've partnered with the workforce system, where the person is working at least 20 hours a week in a job at the prevailing wage. There's a number of requirements, and we provide a link to that full list of requirements. For stories that we accept and publish and disseminate, we will provide each person or team or organization, depending on who submits, up to $2,000 in professional development funds, so things that could purchase membership in professional organizations, money to attend conferences, journal subscriptions. It could be funds that are used to support an individual, the individual who is the focus of the story, who might need different clothes for their job or might need a smartphone that they can use as an accommodation. You know, we are pretty open as to what it can be. We won't be accepting every story, but stories that meet this criteria we would love, and we'll be doing this into our next year of funding as well. So we're hoping that many of the people who participate in this will have such incredible success that they'll be able to write it up and be part of this process as well. We want to highlight also that the LEAD Center has been doing a webinar series on the new Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, WIOA from a disability perspective. So we have 2 more webinars coming up. One is WIOA and the requirements for youth and the opportunities that are available under the new WIOA for youth with disabilities, and that's on June 24th. The 4th is in September, and it's on Section 188, the Non-Discrimination and Equal Opportunity requirements of the Workforce Innovation and Investment Act and Opportunity Act. So we encourage you to register for those. The first 2 webinars in the series are posted on our website. One is WIOA from a disability perspective, and the other is the requirements for unified state planning from a disability perspective and how people can influence the unified state plan that is required under WIOA. We've also included information on how to connect with the LEAD Center, to be on our mailing list, to participate in our webinars, to get updates on what we're doing and participate in some of our initiatives like this one. We so thank Bob Nemick and Corey Smith for their participation in this webinar. We encourage you to send additional questions if you have them. I don't know if Bob or Corey have any parting words.
No, we can answer these questions. Would people able to see these? There's a lot of great questions. Probably ran out of time, so there's a way to get back with people and answer these questions.
Yes, so we'll download all the questions, and we'll together come up with answers so that we can post them for anyone who participates. And again, if you have colleagues that you want to listen to this webinar will be posted on the LEAD Center website, the recording and a transcript of the webinar and the slides that we used, so you'll have access to that. Thank you all for participating, and we look forward to seeing your applications as you move forward to participate in this exciting self-guided discovery process. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.